live to YouTube, and we'll go ahead and get started. I just have to make sure it takes about 10 seconds, 15 seconds to go to YouTube. And I just need to make sure that it's muted so that I'm not getting feedback. Good.
Okay.
So we're good to go. We'll go ahead and get started. So
You
thank
can
you,
start
everyone.
recording if you like.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I need all the blessings I can get. Thank you for
God bless
starting
you.
that up.
All right. So welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I was just talking with Bruce earlier about how, we're all about consciousness. There's so much is what we're interested in is all about consciousness. And so I'm really glad to welcome Bruce Curtis here to talk to us about, quantum physics and recent discoveries and then what it means. What's the applied aspects of this. So I'll let you know that Bruce is a minister, teacher, lecturer, author, and futurist. He's worked with numerous spiritual and scientific organizations, including the John Templeton Foundation, the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences, and the Academy of Future Science to bring forth the highest synthesis of spiritual and scientific thinking in the human community. He has organized international congresses on science and theology, including such topics as bioengineering, the power of love, the future of medicine. Working as director of spiritual studies in the International Space Sciences Organization as director of the Global Academy Genome Institute, and as principal teacher with the Academy for Future Sciences for more than 25 years. Principally, Bruce is a biblical scholar who has offered more than 200 seminars all over Canada, Mexico, and the United States in biblical spirituality and the deeper coding of the word with a capital W as a text for transformation and healing. So, Bruce, I'm so glad to welcome you here. Can't wait to hear what you have to say and then to have a discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Judy. It's so nice of you to invite me. And thank you, everybody, for attending. It's so nice to be with you. It's so nice to be back in California. Marianne and I, my dear wife, we've been craving to get back to California. So maybe this is a sign that we're on our way soon.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a journey we're on, isn't it? And people are very often searching for the unifying factor in life, whether it's in their life or the life of others or their group or their church or their spiritual fellowship, whatever it is. I think people crave more fellowship and unity. And so, that kind of gets to this great mystery that we live in a mystery. And I love the quote that that I put in my paper earlier. All of you, I should have a copy of the PDF, and its copy is available, so no worries on that. But I just love this quote from Max Planck. In his paper, he wrote, "Where is science going?" And he said, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature. And that is because, in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve." And so, when we look at the cosmos, it is somewhat mysterious. Everything moves so beautifully in harmony, magnificent. The stars, the galaxies, the nebulae. It's magnificent. But then beyond all that is this mystery that's invisible. Who are we? What is this thing of our mind, our consciousness? Why are we different from, say, a rock on the ground? And what is this that is consciousness? So, I always think of consciousness as the great mystery because, in a way, it takes consciousness to think about consciousness. It takes consciousness to study and discuss consciousness. And so, my working hypothesis for the last 20, 30 years has been that we are searching, scientists have searched for a unified field, but we know that everything exists in consciousness. And therefore, the unified field has been staring us in the face all along. It is It is mind stuff, as you'll find this marvelous quote from George Wald. Now, George Wald was a Nobel Prize winning biologist at Harvard, and he basically said the stuff of which physical reality is composed is mind stuff. So, we can see this evolution, this movement to understanding a more continuous grasp of reality. And so some of the people that I've been privileged to work with have developed key areas. And so, one of those key areas is to understand that physical reality is connected to other spiritual realities, and that we see that there's an invisible energy in which we move. Some call it the zero point field, the quantum vacuum. David Bohm said the sea of energy. But, we look and we lift up our hand and we see maybe nothing. But does our hand contain nothing? Well, we know there's air. But beyond the air, where does the air come from? And so underneath all of it, there is this moving sea of energy which brings particles forth, and it also brings particles into destruction. So creation and annihilation of physical reality is all a function of this sea. And this is why, when you read in that little introduction, Judy, about coding of the Bible, not so much like a tricky cryptographic code, but more like understanding that words can be used poetically, spiritually, scientifically to speak of greater realities. So they could have multiple reference, could have a physical referent, but there could be something else. And one of those words that we're talking about is sea. And in the word sea, people naturally go to thinking of maybe the Pacific Ocean or the Mediterranean. And then when you read Genesis, and it talks about the dry land appearing out of the sea. So if you look at it from a materialistic framework, well, people say, oh, that's a nice mythology, the way creation is described. But if you look at it from a more energetic, spiritual perspective, we see that if we consider Earth to be the harder stuff and the sea to be this aqueous expanse, then we see that indeed the hard matter emerges from the energetic sea. So it's true on a much, much deeper, profound, multidimensional level if you allow the words to speak at their most profound level. And so that's kind of a decoding that I've worked in many areas, from the cosmological sections of like the book of Job, which is very profound and even gets into the compactification of matter. And so I want to approach, the scientific work and the spiritual work kind of as one. What scientists are doing is emerging. They've recently seen that, you can validate consciousness existing out of the body. You can experimentally validate that. My good friend in LA, Konstantin Korotkov from Russia, who was formerly a director at the Institute in St. Petersburg, at the Institute of Fine Optics, Mechanics and Optics. He is doing a lot of experimentation with telepathy and sending messages to people far distant. And he's validating the flow of consciousness out of the body and so forth, many things that we want to appropriate, because if we're going to tap into our full potential, we're going to want to function as the most multidimensional version of ourselves, where we are able to communicate, and how can we communicate? We communicate through consciousness. We communicate through messages that can be received in many different ways. So some of the things we see in terms of the body, we see there are a lot of languages in the body. a perfect example, and a lot of mechanisms of moving information through the body. Some mechanisms, we're not even sure we can find a physical basis for those mechanisms. Marianne was, my wife was the uh, managing editor of a top medical journal. I was kind of a helper as as another editor. But one thing we did was we received a lot of papers in acupuncture and a lot of papers in consciousness, and we did a special energy medicine issue in which we explored kind of the blue sky region of what people were doing in consciousness. And one of the things we learned was that from the ancient documents as well as modern studies, they have a very difficult time finding any physical basis for the acupuncture meridians. They flow through the physical, but it's not like they have a structure in which they flow, which also reminds us that the energetic component of life is so much greater in some ways than the physical component. I'll give you a perfect example. DNA, because our whole body depends upon the language of DNA to create the form that gives us a presence for our consciousness. Our body exists as a presencing function, a presencing structure for our consciousness. So everything has to be really tightly coordinated and scripted for the body to emerge as that useful form. So really has a blueprint. But what governs that blueprint? What makes that blueprint work? Recent work by fairly recent work, 60s and 70s, Fritz Popp from Germany, really pioneered biophotons. That the light energy, the laser-like capacity of the body, the DNA genome, is far more precise than our best industrial lasers that we can produce. It's more coherent, and that it is the biophotonics that does the programming. And so the DNA by itself would be useless without that energetic component. It takes the waves to activate it. Proof of this was done by the great Russian, I had the privilege of dialoguing with and communicating with and writing to and corresponding with Peter Gurayev, who took some dead, what would you call spores, cells, dead seeds from Chernobyl. And he was able to set up a laser system where he could use the information from living seeds, from seeds that were not destroyed, and he could pass that information and code that information into a laser beam, pass that laser beam into the completely destroyed, radioactively dead seeds, and he was able to create life in those seeds and to germinate those seeds. So we know that the light component that goes with the genome, that goes with DNA, is so critical. That's literally everything. So that helps to bring us closer to this notion that the universe is mind stuff. We have some structures that we depend upon that are not really, in a sense, the consciousness light, but they are the structures we use through which we can project our consciousness light, through which we can presence ourselves. And that can be similarly looked at in terms of, say, other dimensions. Like if we wanted to presence in other dimensions, we can hypothesize that we would need to have some other type of vehicle which could allow us to go into those other dimensions. So in view of that, some people have done remarkable work recently in physics and in kind of altering relativity, in kind of remodeling and refiguring relativity, like my colleague in Slovenia, Mr. Sorley, Amrit Sorley, who sent me his paper on advanced relativity. And he eliminated time. He saw that time as a dimension was not necessarily correct. He built his model with time as simply, the passage of events. So time is simply the ordering of events, but not treating it as a dimension. He wrote relativity equations where he could see that there were many layers of consciousness from dense matter, so from solid material, finer and finer and finer up to pure spirit. So relatively showing there's a relative continuum from, things that we would call inanimate and don't exhibit consciousness up through levels of consciousness we're familiar with, like trees and animals and people, and then going higher into spiritual levels of consciousness, eventually going to pure spirit. And so, because of formulating a continuum like that, where each level could maybe have a mathematical description, but we can see how better that works to show a continuity of life. And so, the only thing that would separate us from other realms would be the ability to be in that spectrum or that wavelength or that set of frequencies. But we can communicate with those levels. And part of what Amrit said in his paper was that he indicated that that information from higher levels can actually be coded into photons. And the photons can carry that information. That information can pass into the microtubules of the brain, and we could actually receive those information units from higher levels, translated into the architecture, the language of our own thinking, but the information can be actually encoded in photons. Now, we know that we have perfect experimentation that shows the coding of information. For example, I don't know how many people in this wonderful assembly are familiar with the phantom DNA effect, but the phantom DNA effect was investigated, was discovered by Peter Garayev, and one of our colleagues in San Francisco we used to meet with also promoted that quite a lot, that phantom DNA effect. And basically what they discovered was they had a sample of DNA, and they found when they took it out of the room, it left a wave signature in the air. So it showed that DNA was also a light transducer. And that also, the other thing it showed with it, besides the DNA processing light, it also showed that space is not space, but space is energy that can receive that imprint of light from DNA. So that indicates to us that we can utilize that in the future. We could utilize that to create restoration, renewal, regeneration, areas that we don't deal with much in medicine, but which are so important, the regeneration of tissues. And so the phantom DNA effect is a great reminder that we've got to use consciousness more and learn, study not only the physics of going into that, but how our consciousness can participate in a physics that can empower that type of transformation of reality. So going beyond the simplicity that, our observation of an experiment might change it according to the wave particle duality of nature that everybody's familiar with. That is it a particle, is it a wave? Well, it depends how you're perceiving the experiment. But going way beyond that to where we can intentionally put certain message units into the object that we're considering or that we're working with. So these are some of the people on the cutting edge. And of course, some of them have captured tremendous benefits, like our friend Gabor Lednicki in Hungary. In Budapest, he has a clinic, and he's created a whole series of devices. And in those devices, he projects through an antenna, very sensitive antenna that he's created, and you can sit on this pad, and he'll project symphonies of different frequencies that connect in with our biology. So they can improve our capacity to adapt, because in a sense, life depends upon adaptation because your environment is constantly changing. And the biggest health challenge that we face in modern times is the proliferation of different electromagnetic fields. Alien. These are alien electromagnetic signals. They're not signals that the body was designed to evolve in or to live in. We were designed to live in with the signals of meadows and forests and ponds and waterfalls and the sun. These are all the signals that our body was designed to interact with and be a part of. In a sense, they're a part of us. A lot of those signals trigger processes in the body. For example, we need to kind of follow the sun cycle. And we have those rhythms, circadian rhythms. And so all of that connects with the signals in the environment. So one of the things Gabor has done is he has utilized natural signals. And so he's created a little device called a space harmonizer. And what the space harmonizer does, it's a true biofeedback device. So it reads the signals in a room, and then it emits signals that are more natural. So in your room, you've got a modem, you've got cell phones, you've got computers, you've got all kinds of devices. And so the space harmonizer reads the signals, and what it puts, it doesn't really neutralize those signals, but it works with your body so that your body, in a sense, it ignores those signals by virtue of having the natural signals projected. So it's like you're getting the signals you need, and so your body can kind of ignore. It's sort of like, let's say your neighbor's playing loud music and you've got a beautiful symphony. If you turn your symphony fairly loud, then you can kind of ignore the loud music from the neighbors. So in this way, you can restore the natural symphony and protect yourself. If somebody comes in the room who's angry, somebody comes into your house who has a cell phone and they're angry and there's all this new noisy signaling going on, the space harmonizer will compensate and emit other signals to counteract that new incoming noise. And but see, this is none of these things are any different from what we can achieve ourselves. You know, we can, in a more masterful way, like a Qigong master, we can harmonize very difficult things if we get into the right consciousness layer. You know, you can't just from your intellect, sit there and go, well, I'm going to harmonize this. I'm going to make this peaceful. You have to enter into that state. You have to move into that level of consciousness. So one of the things that we know, the ancients knew that when they spoke of the word, like we understand the word capital W, like you said, we understand the word, the logos, that consciousness field that encompasses all of our minds, that emanation from God out of which each of us was fashioned. So we're all part of that original template, that original blueprint. And so we're created in that image, and therefore, because we're created in that image, through that image, we can connect with other levels. And so by means of that consciousness, the worlds speak to each other. That's from an ancient texts that was called the Odes. These were early pieces of music, first century, very, very early writing. And one of the things they wrote was that the work of the word and the work of the logos is also its end. So the end and the means are one. No end justifying the means. The work and the objective are one. And it is light and the dawning of thought. So that logos is our consciousness light. So by it, the worlds talk to one another. So that's how we communicate. People want to know, how can we communicate with other worlds? By focusing and entering into and stilling the noise of our everyday beta consciousness, our intellect, our emotions, and moving into the layer of consciousness that all life shares, because all life is contained in one unified envelope. So starting with the realization that the unified field is consciousness, that the one envelope that contains everything is consciousness. It's that consciousness, that light of consciousness. With under that assumption, we can better understand how it's really easier to communicate with other worlds than we think. It's easier to speak to celestial beings than we think. Not to sit down and channel, but to go into very great stillness. Like the old psalmist wrote, be still and know that I am God. Be still, being still. That's the hardest thing for people, and the world kind of makes it more challenging every day. More things grab your attention. Just like you could be walking through an airport, like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, and all these things are flashing at you from every direction. And but in certain stillness, you can walk through that in a way that where you're not impeded. So these little devices like the space harmonizer and the healing devices that Gabor has made, they are sort of reminders of what we're about. They're, technology. Techno is the children, and then logos, the word. So the children of our word. So our technology, in a sense, has to come out of our image. So if we're creating devices like that, we're basically developing that out of ourselves. And so his healing devices have a lot to, you can address blood pressure, heart problems. I found that his work with the anti-aging programs and the heart programs, they can cause any kind of like arrhythmia or tachycardia to be still and to calm down. But one of the most dramatic things we've discovered working with those bioregulation technologies, they help you regulate your biology. But the great key to them is when you couple your consciousness to those electromagnetic signals, when you pray or meditate while you're working on something, working on your digestion, working on your nervous system, working on your kidneys. But if you attach your consciousness with those signals and the space harmonizer and those elements, coupling them together, you get much more profound results. So in a sense, showing you that you can be the Qigong practitioner. You can do the work of a Qigong master. You have to put yourself into that consciousness level so that the proper energy can flow through the body. So let's see, where are we? How are we doing in time? Wow, that moved fast. So we can cover a few more things and we get to the halfway point. We could entertain all kinds of questions and conversation. But I wanted to, so let's go back to light, because the light is the foundation of everything. That's the beginning. Let there be light. But what is the light that we're talking about? What is the light, for example, um, the light of consciousness? So there's different types of light. And that's very clear if for those who have looked and kind of seen in the way the decoding of, in particular, the writings of the Gospel of John talks a lot about light, and it's very clear in there. You can see the difference between light and light. So, and did anybody see the movie about this young blind French girl who was sending out signals to the Allies about the positioning of Nazi movements? And her caretaker, her father, you later find out it's her father. He tells her the most important light is the light you cannot see. So that's kind of what we're getting at in this presentation on mind. And the great mystery of mind is we're talking about the light we cannot see, the light which is our presence, which shines through the physical light. Because our body is light too. Everything is light, but it's crystallized. Matter, as David Bohm and others have said, many have said, matter is crystallized light. But through that light can shine the light of consciousness, the light of being. So the light we cannot see is really everything. And so this spirit which is far more swift and refined than anything we could possibly know, faster than anything we know, because it's instant media, it's instant communication. By spirit, you can have a direct impulse from God, from any higher consciousness being that's reaching out. You can also send back by spirit. So there is that unified field, in a sense, as spirit is the ultimate refined unified field. So in that field, we can struggle along and try to know things by being objective and trying to be, what they would call gnosis in the Greek community, the knowledge. But there's another word, epignosis, and epignosis is knowledge upon something or participatory knowledge. That's when you participate in the thing you're trying to know. And that's the real accurate knowledge. That's the higher knowledge. You can really, because Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, basically he made an ultimate critique of knowledge and reason, the critique of pure reason he wrote, because he said that you cannot really fully know the thing you're studying. But if you're in the spirit and you're participating in the reality, it's like a husband and wife. That's why in the ancient tongues they always said that you would know one another. You enter in, you participate with each other, you become a part of each other, and that's how you can know something. So we go beyond the limitations of that external knowledge, but into an accurate or true knowledge or participatory knowledge. So that's where our consciousness has to guide us into the new physics. So that in the new physics, in the consciousness physics, we're not only studying consciousness, but we're using consciousness to receive insight into what it is we want to know or what it is we want to help harness for other human beings. So our consciousness becomes part of the methodology as well. Now, this is not new. I mean, George Washington Carver found over 300 uses for the peanut. And every morning he prayed and he talked to God and he said God gave him every bit of his knowledge. And he's not unique. He was a brilliant guy. He was a dedicated guy. But that kind of dedication and practice and discipline is what can take us to the forefront of the field that interests us the most. And so that's our future of physics will be to harness our consciousness better to our physics. And I see that a lot with Konstantin Karakov and Gabor and these various people that we get to work with, that in their particular passion of study in medicine or consciousness, that they actually are harnessing their consciousness to go deep into seeing how they can address what is needed. So, for example, Gabor was making devices in Germany for BICOM, which was the biggest pulsed electromagnetic field maker. And this was like 30, 40 years ago. And he told them, he said, the human body, the fields of the cells are constantly fluctuating. You can't just put constant signals. It would be like if you imagine you went to Carnegie Hall and you're going to a great cello recital, and the cellist played one note, just one note. So in the first 30 seconds, or the first 15 seconds, you go, oh, this is interesting. After half an hour, you'd be tearing your hair out. You'd be running for the exit. And so you can tire out the body by just the same signals. It's not how the body works. All the cells, each cell is engaging every second. Every cell in your body is engaging in 7,000 electromagnetic communications. So the little tower for insulin, the insulin receptor sites, the little insulin receptor site is sending out signals so the insulin can find the receptor site. Now, the chance of doing that would be like if you bought a lottery ticket in California and you won every day for a month. That's the chance of insulin finding a receptor site without a control tower. Sort of like Newark Airport. You're going to have trouble. There's nobody there, nobody talking. What happens in life? Well, chemicals can can disable receptor sites. They can disable signaling. They can mangle it. And also all these new alien electromagnetic signals coming in from 5G and everything we do has changed the environment. So those little cells are messed up. So what Gabor proved in laboratories, in medical laboratories in Kiev, in Ukraine, and other places, is they showed that they could restore insulin receptor sites with one single treatment of electromagnetic signals. So that if you had a person who's insulin resistant, you can treat them with gentle signals, but they're not constant, they're fluctuating. It's what he called constant modulation. He said the body needs constant modulation. So Bicom didn't want to change. They were happy with their devices. So Gabor left Bicom 20, 30 years ago and formed his own company in Hungary. And all of his devices work with constant modulation. Just like you go to a symphony and it's constantly the different instruments, the different tones and harmonies and chords all intermingling. That's what the body's like. So we have to take that approach in terms of attending to the things of our health and using constant modulation. So another thing that we have to pay attention is to waters, because we are waters filling the sea. Like there's this interesting expression in the Old Testament, knowledge will fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And so, you know, a child might say, well, that's of course, I mean, the sea is made of water. Yeah, but think about that. As the waters fill the sea, and the sea is this aqueous manifestation. It's an expanse. If you look at it energetically, this sea, we live in a sea that's an aqueous expanse, and we are made of water. We're 90% water. So we are the waters that fill the sea. So knowledge of God and knowledge of creation will fill the earth as we fill the sea. So we have to be those transducers. And we know very well all the studies, the Del Giudice studies in Italy in homeopathy, that verified absolutely beyond a doubt that water holds the signal of a homeopathic remedy. So we realize then that we too are homeopathic remedies. And then we should then store up the signals that are nutritious for others, that are healthy, by inputting the right inputs. And so we also had the opportunity to work with the Japanese scientist, Dr. Emoto, Dr. Emoto. And we asked him to make us a crystal, because he would take beautiful um, he would take beautiful sounds and words and tape them on and create crystals, freeze them. And he showed that harmonious music and harmonious words, positive words, created more beautiful, balanced, harmonious crystals. And so he made a crystal for our medical issue that we produced on energy medicine, and he made us one for the science of light, for bioenergy from electromagnetics to the science of light. So he took our phrase for that issue and he made a crystal, and it actually produced a beautiful crystal emerging from another crystal. So it was like that thought form of this new medicine of light, which is where we're going. See, all of these things, we have to go with consciousness light, the future of our physics, the future of our medicine, the future of our interpersonal relations. All of these things have to emerge from consciousness light. We have to bring consciousness to bear. So when we think of our future, our future of being in the light, so what are we going to be? What's our form going to be? Well, as we grow in consciousness, we in purity would grow beyond a body that is a shadow, a body that also in which death inhabits, because these forms were not designed as they were designed to pass away so that we could be born from the light and then emerge in a new form. So we develop and grow our consciousness. We nurture our consciousness with the right food, spiritual food, and the right elements like the water, the signals going into the water. And in that, we grow our spiritual body so that we can eventually come out of the shadow. And what's interesting is that, a lot of people love the 21st Psalm, going through the valley of the shadow of death. We emerge in the living waters. We emerge in the waters of rest. So the valley of the word shadow of death really is actually has the word image embedded in it. So our image, our image is a shadow of that light reality. And so by filling it with light, we prepare ourselves to move right into that next embodiment. And in fact, that other body is already existing. The question is it going to remain kind of neutral? Is it going to remain kind of inert or unused? Or are you going to use your spiritual body? That's so important because your spiritual body is your ability, your vehicle that can allow you to be in other levels of consciousness, other, um, yes, for example, like if you people, a lot of people they seek an out of the body kind of experience, and that's what your consciousness can be constant or continuous in and out of the body experience through your spiritual body. Now, the ancient Hindus spoke of multiple different bodies that you can have different consciousness vehicles. But as long as you have a spiritual vehicle in which your consciousness can be aware, then you can experience being in another domain. And I'm sure we probably have people in this gathering today who've had that experience. I myself have been out of my body in communion with other intelligence in another domain that didn't have the same solidity as this dense three-dimensional domain. It had solidity. I mean, I sat on a chair and, there were trees, but everything was of a finer being. And there, of course, you don't need oxygen. So breathing is not really, it's just different. You have all the energy flowing through, and all of the communication comes in pure information. So it's translated into the structure and linguistics your mind is familiar with, not your brain, because you don't have your brain with you. Your brain is not with you, but your mind. And so that answers the question that people seek. Does the mind need its brain? And it doesn't. That's the beauty of our life. That mind is prior to the brain, but the brain gives us a good vehicle to presence our mind into this particular world. So the brain is significant for us in this particular domain. So there's lots we can do if we move, not just the idea where we want to study consciousness, but I think what we want to do for future medicine, future astrophysics, future biology, future mathematics, future linguistics, future sociology and psychology and interpersonal relations, future medicine, all these things we want to come from consciousness and put consciousness into the practice, into the methodology, and into the generation of the results of the things we want to know, that we can expand our capacities more and more into the light. So we begin with light as the first manifestation, and then realizing that the first light was consciousness light. And then out of that consciousness light, all things were born. And we know, if you want to go back to spiritual expressions of that, the light that enlightened every person that comes into the world. So that first light is the light that gives us being, that gives us agency, conditional autonomy, because we are, as waters, just as the waters fill the sea, if you take a sample of water, there are going to be different structures because water bonds. It's bipolar, so water bonds into different structures. And so in that way, we do too. We're in a sea, but we have family, we have friends, we have communities, FMBR, we have all kinds of things that give us different structures that have a not a true autonomy, but sort of an interdependence. And therefore, we have minds that are part of one mind, like the great mathematician and physicist Erwin Schrödinger, who created the electron equations. He said there is exactly one mind in the universe. And that's an important thing to remember because we are part of that one mind. And what's so interesting is that we have an experience that sometimes we think that we are a separate individual mind, but it's not true. I mean, the water particle in the sea is not a separate autonomous individual particle. It's part of an ever-changing flow. In fact, if you analyze water, it's constantly combining and joining and breaking off, and it's constantly moving and changing. So we're the same way. We're waters in a sea, and we're constantly forming new connections, but we have to grow to this point where we live and rejoice in our unity as well as our individuality. So we rejoice in this ever-changing combination of relationships and being, knowing that that is a great mystery, that somehow we each have an individualized mind, but that mind is part of a greater unity mind, of one mind, and we're getting inputs not only from our neighbors next door, not only from other people we relate to and are on the phone with or send us messages, send us their love, but also from other levels of reality. We're getting inputs that are guiding us ever towards greater perfection, ever towards a greater unity. And so I hope, because now we're about halfway through. So I hope that I've covered some of the foundations of those different sciences. And if everybody would like to have a conversation, I'm quite open to whatever Judy would like to orchestrate as our conductor.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Thank you. I have a couple of questions before. Well, I want to let people know, the people who are on the Zoom call, if you have a question and you would like, um, we'd really love for you to kind of raise your hand and unmute so we could have so you could ask your question directly. If not, type it in the chat or the Q&A, and we can go from there. I'll read it like I normally do, but. I am so interested in this idea that quantum physics, the research in quantum physics is really confirmatory of these ancient traditions, the mystical traditions, the Upanishads and the Kabbalah and all of these things
Yes.
describe the universe like you're saying in slightly different terms, but and I'm wondering, have you found anything in science that contradicts anything that's come out of the the ancient wisdom traditions, or are they pretty much aligning?
Yeah, I don't see major contradictions, Judy. I see, for example, moving from quantum physics to astrophysics just for a second, that the cosmogony of our universe, the one question that Big Bang people don't are not really able to address is where did it come from for the Big Bang? Whereas inflationary theory that was pioneered at Stanford University with Andre Linde, that's very easy because this universe appears to have emerged as a bubble from another universe. Rapid expansion. That matches the language of the book of Job. So there's no contradiction between inflationary cosmology and mystical writing. So I would say that, and now in terms of quantum physics, no, there's an uncertainty that troubled Einstein with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that there is a particle wave duality, and God doesn't play dice with the universe, right? That's what Einstein did not like, that uncertainty. But you see, when you get into the explicate order, what we see, then the implicate order behind it, and then another level of consciousness, the super implicate order, then instructions can come through or from our own participation, but there are other elements that are guiding that quantum event. So, it's not that there's uncertainty in the universe, there's openness. And that openness allows participatory engagement. So, in terms of, like, say, you're healing someone, okay? So, you're not leaving that person subject to just chance or randomness, but you're engaging with intentionality and you're engaging with the gift of light in a way to guide their processes towards restoration, towards harmonization. And there's no inconsistency there. All of that is quantum mechanics and mystical traditions are very coherent. We just need more polishing on the science side and more polishing in our nuanced languaging of the mystical side. Not to just say, oh, just think about it and it'll change. But you have to be in the right consciousness and the right language, to make a change. Like, for example, if you want to levitate your table, you have to really be in the right consciousness to engulf that mass. Just like, flying or walking on water, things like this that, require a more unified consciousness.
We talked about this yesterday when we were talking about the story, when Jesus was walking on water, right? About how he created a field, right? That enabled him, that frequency to be able to do that. And in the story, he invites Peter to walk with him. Get out of the boat, come walk with me on the water. And Peter can do that for a bit until he starts doubting, right? And then he starts
Yeah,
sinking. And so I was just wondering about, so in this story, does Jesus produce the field that enables Peter to do that, or is Peter sort of aligning himself to Jesus's field? I was just sort of a silly wondering on my part about how
it's
that
a great
how
wondering.
that
Yeah, it's a
field.
great wondering because, it is that Jesus was participating in that consciousness. He became one with that universal consciousness, with the totality, the one who can control the elements, who's master over the elements. So for that moment, when he, in that first embrace, that first thought, this is exciting. I'm one with this consciousness. I'm one with this being, with this master. And so he just went for it. And then when he went into his separateness, and and then he had said, help me, I'm sinking. So, we have to be in that totality. And so, yeah, and here we have this reference coming from Angelica, perfect from, Paramahansa Yogananda.
Right.
And so it's all consciousness, basically. And so Peter rose into that consciousness of Christ. In that moment, he dropped himself, he just entered in. But then he started to think and become separate again and be back in his separate self.
Mhm.
So, and his old physics and his old limitations. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of, so Deborah wants to ask a question. Deborah is a master homeopath. And so Deborah, if you can unmute yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, your talk is very, very interesting. Hi, Judy. Yeah, I've been going back to rereading the basics of homeopathy just to go back to the source. And of course, the source is Samuel Hahnemann. And Samuel Hahnemann talked about the vital force. So the vital force is something that pervades all levels of the human being. It's a thing that keeps us alive. And it's a highly influenceable thing. So it is influenced by viruses, by this, by that, by shocks, by everything that it experiences. And what the homeopathic remedy does is it influences the vital force. So it's so it influences the vital force, and it takes over it superimposes its own message onto the vital force, the message, and there's resonance. So it displaces the disease through that. So there's a couple of interesting things that you said. You talked about the the necessity of always changing the signal that you're giving to, well, he would call it to the vital force. So he said you would never repeat the same energy twice. He said you always have to alter it slightly so that it never receives the same exact input. So that's interesting, verifying what you said. And the other interesting thing was there have been experiments with the Homeopathic Research Institute. And what they would do is they would put, for example, a vial with a particular remedy in it, for example, nux vomica. And then they would put next to it another vial that has nothing but plain water. And then they would remove the other vial. The vial that had nothing in it, if you tested it, would then have nux vomica in it. It there is a contagion.
Yes, that's what you speak of, Deborah, is that resonance. It's so important.
Yeah. So what I do these days is when I give a remedy, I don't necessarily give a remedy because as you said, we're mostly water. So just the way that test tube will take the imprint of the remedy by proximity, we too can take the imprint of a remedy by proximity. So I often just have the person put the remedy in the room. If they are in the room and there is a resonance, they will receive that message and they will get the healing benefit of the remedy. So that's the only things I wish to say. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that, Deborah. Those are great contributions, and it's that's very much you can see in the story of phantom DNA how related that is. So we are open. That's why we are not isolated from all of these other influences. They're coming at all times. So it's good to have those remedies. One of the things that we do with the bioregulation is there's a device coupling and a little platform that you can make remedies and you can take signals and put them into water, and you can make yourself a little remedy of what you need for your ailment. And then you can just keep that in proximity of yourself. So you're bringing up a great science. Homeopathy is, it's a shame that the Rockefeller group, directed medicine away from biophysics, away from homeopathy, more towards a chemical approach to medicine and a symptomatic approach to medicine. And so we don't have, but as widespread practice of homeopathy, although we have new good research institutes that are, working diligently to bring it all back, to expand it and bring new remedies.
I think that's we live at a very exciting time where there's a lot happening, a lot of alternative, right? Just a kind of broader approaches to health. And a couple of years ago we had David Gibson on, who's a sound healer, and he is working in hospitals to bring, vibrational medicine into clinical settings. And he boldly claimed that within 10 years it would be standard practice, that vibrational medicine would be widely available in Western medical settings. So let's hope. Jackie wants
We're
to.
working with that in many domains in
Yeah.
vibrational medicine, and the one with the bioregulation, they've got hospital beds all over Turkey and Budapest and Switzerland and many other places that are, especially South America in Colombia, where they're able to take people off of kidney dialysis, like you would flip a switch on the wall. You can get them off dialysis. So there's all kinds of things we can do with that
I think
vibrational
in a lot of
medicine.
places in the world that are more open in their approaches, especially Switzerland and Germany and Russia and Brazil. So Jackie wants to ask a question. Jackie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. So you mentioned how humans are a biological match for the Earth, how intelligent water is, and the resonant frequency of self-organizing Earth. And we are a self-organizing body, and that our biology is the technology, and that consciousness is at the basis of all life. And so, why do we need space harmonizers or communing with celestial beings? Wouldn't it be to our advantage to just go outside and start building our EI, our Earth intelligence, and resonate with the vibration that's already perfectly tuned to us to help mitigate and balance the world vibrations that are all man-made? We have made the world from the Earth, but we have forgotten the Earth's intelligence. As indigenous people had sacred relationships, we don't have that. We just keep extracting and objectifying, even though we now know in quantum mechanics there is no objective. We are co-creating with reality we experience, but our whole life support is based on the Earth's self-organizing, perfect resonant intelligence. And it always seems to be missed in trying to do something more over here in the world versus just outside. Making a relationship with a tree and a water is right there, perfect. The light we cannot see is what we feel in our heart. We already are harmonizing. And if you've read Tony Wright's book, Return to the Brain of Eden, there was a time when humans, our consciousness was completely integrated with the earth. And since data points, information points are outweighing atoms on the in our universe, it would
Yeah.
behoove us to not keep throwing our intelligence into machines. Rather, we can own it fully by just connecting with the earth's incredible balance, force, and currency that is a part of who we are. So why is that missed?
Well,
Amen.
I don't think it's missed. I think it's a both and situation. It's not either or. I mean, you're absolutely right. But, many people have obligations. They're at home, at business, they're feeding a family. They have to work many hours to feed their family. They may even be doing it from their home office, and they may not be able to get out enough, make the time to get out. We can help compensate while they're in those situations where they can't go out. So it's just like a homeopathic remedy, you know. Why take a homeopathic remedy? Well, sometimes we get out of sorts, and so it's not so much that we need to be purists, but we should find the things that are good, and we should do our best to utilize the things that provide good to people, all the possible things that we see that provide good. And so, I'm not into an endless proliferation of machines, but and I don't promote it. I just use it as an example because really the value of the bioregulation signaling devices is they're little symphonies. They're symphonies biosimilar to your own, and so they're instructive because everybody on this planet is learning. Everybody has an individual learning program from the Creator. God's mind is so extensive that just for example, I'll give you an example. I don't know how many people are in this lovely gathering with us today, but let's say there were 50 people. So God's mind is so extensive that God can hear not only the thoughts of each person in this group simultaneously, but the thoughts of our hearts and also of every other entity in the universe. So we see that we're all on an individualized learning program, and some of the value of these devices, for example, the bioregulation, some of the value lies in teaching the person about themselves. And that's what we've found is that, it's helped us amplify our own practices. And we're not hooked on them. I mean, we do use them as needs arise, but I will tell you that through coupling my consciousness with some of the signals, I was able to close up a very substantially large um, hernia that developed when we had to move thousands of boxes in out of our last big home and kind of size down to this nice little two-bedroom kind of cottage, which we love. And in that move, I punctured a big hole in my stomach. And for a couple of years, it was hard to get that tissue to generate because connective tissue is very slow to regenerate. But in applying my consciousness at a very deep level, going down to a foundational ground level, and coupling it with, having used some of the signals to signal the DNA, then the consciousness level I came at from my own deep, deep, deep meditation, it caused that tissue to close. So I didn't have to get a surgery to put some kind of gauze into my gut, and I didn't have to have any stitches or any incisions, but the tissue, the muscle and the connective tissue, which separated, has grown back together. Now, you won't find any doctors really tell you that they see that happening or but that's that's just a basic, starting point of all the things we can do. Really, all things are possible. So I applaud what you're saying about going into nature, because everything's there. Those are the primal signals we need. But our signals are upset by things in our environment. And so the electromagnetics that are now everywhere on the earth they do offset their own cellular signaling processes, and also the chemicals. So between chemicals and electromagnetics, people are put at a disadvantage, and sometimes you need a crutch. If you break your leg and you wrap it up, you might need a crutch to walk. So, we look at this as a nice adjunct, but most instructive is the teaching about our consciousness and the teaching about how our biological presence works. That's what we like. We like the fact that it's instructive. It's not that we have to lean on it or that we depend on machines, but it's very instructive. So it's another perspective to look at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Jerry wants to ask a question. So go ahead, Jerry.
I agree. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love your thoughts, and I applaud you for what you're doing. It's really the basis of what I believe in. So, and Judy can attest to that aspect of it. With regard to some of these thoughts, we are thoughts, and that's my belief system. We are consciousness, and I love the aspect of coming into that phase where everything is possible. And the way that my friend Johim and I do it is we use affirmations, and the affirmations are very simple statements, and they bring you into that center of stillness. Like the simple statement, I am, rethink I am, centers you into the stillness of yourself. And in that center, you're connected to everything, and you're in that state of harmony. And when Johim does it, and to the extent I do it, when you bring yourself into that center, the whole surrounding comes into that center also. And things change accordingly. And it's something that people can learn very easily by stating affirmations. Your vibrational rate goes up when you state it, it increases, but then you hit that stillness that is there. And then all that motion of the pendulum or anything else sort of goes away, and you're now connected to everything. So I just love what your whole lecture is marvelous. So thank you for making those statements.
Well, thank you. And I think that couples in nicely. Thank you, Jerry, because I think that couples in nicely into Deborah's comment, because part of getting into that stillness is also sometimes going into nature and remembering what it's like. We're not disconnected from the earth, but a big part of modernity is that people find it hard to get still because they become disconnected from that of which they are part, namely the larger earth body and the earth knowledge. But what you said is so beautiful, because thoughts, when you talk about us being thoughts, it's so right on. And the fact too that the universe that we see, is really a thought. It is the expression of our thought, of the mind of God. So the universe is kind of the readout of the consciousness. And in fact, George Wald, I mentioned, the Harvard biologist who won the Nobel Prize, And he once said the universe is not a great machine, it's a great thought. And so I look at the universe as the readout. Now, Earth is very chaotic in terms of some of the geopolitics and some of the way people treat each other on Earth. So there's a lot of kind of conflicting and confronting and thoughts, but they exist in a larger harmony within the whole. So they will eventually, all of that will eventually be harmonized because there are guiding light principles and forces and consciousness intelligence that is guiding everything to a more perfect unity. So there's a unity. I mean, everything is one, but it's not all consciousness one. In other words, it's all one, but there are elements of the consciousness that are growing into the recognition of that oneness so they can embrace their neighbor in oneness, so they can express that oneness. So, the thoughts that we see on earth, like you say, we can also harmonize those with our thoughts. So the thoughts and the words that we put out, we can make a contribution to leading and guiding everything into the one.
Yeah, there's a new, let me have one more second. There's some new affirmations that my friend Yohim has come up with. I mentioned it. One great one is a very simple thing. I am thoughts, I am. And that produces a huge amount of connectedness, stillness that is there. Another one is in terms of healing, I am beyond disharmony. And that produces immense amounts of healing. Just repeating that statement produces healing. And his latest one is very hard to comprehend by most people, but is something that brings you into the center of stillness very quickly. And I am beyond thoughts. So it goes
Beautiful.
back to the essence of the essence of the essence, basically. I am is sort of your essence, but then there's something beyond that. And by recognizing that, it brings you into another state. So I just thought I'd mention these couple of
No, thank you.
things.
That last one is so poignant because that really connects to my experience of seeing my flesh close up. And the night before the day that I woke up and I was like searching for that hole, and it was gone. Everything was closed up. But the night before, I went down to a place where there is no thought, and I just, I wasn't praying for healing. I was used to the problem, just kind of soldiering on with it and kind of deciding what approach I was going to take to heal it, and I had let go. But that night, I got into I just was going into meditation, and I just thought I would go into the deep ground of being, go into the depth of God where there's no thought. And the next morning, I woke up to a great surprise.
Yeah, you're in that state, and that is a marvelous state to be in.
It
So,
is. And we
thank
need to
you.
do that a little bit every day if we can, is to go down to the depth of the ground of our being. And in that ground state, all stillness, be still and know that I am God, or I am beyond thought. I think that at that level, the openness to many different miracles will come about.
I agree entirely with you. So
Totally. Thank you. Thank you,
thank
Jerry.
you.
Thanks,
Um,
Jerry.
And don't you think that that's what it seems to be part of the project is that we're doing this on a collective level because people have done this individually throughout time, very kind of select people. But it seems that more and more of us are being called to do this as part of the evolution of our consciousness. Don said, seems to me that some of us are learning to modulate some of these energies due to the Earth's Schumann resonances being impacted by the sun right now, which are also impacting us as well. We don't seem to have much other choice but to go with the flow and learn to modulate these impactful energies, which are also raising our consciousness. She says she can now tune into a 5D consciousness and see fractals through her third eye. So I've heard of a lot of people having really expanded experiences, and they seem to be accelerating. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I want to thank Don for writing that little message. And it is our experience that more and more people are able to move into the greater reality of their being, because we do not, we do not operate, we do not live fully as we were designed to be. And so, we are being brought back, and there are all these elements that are part of it, whether the sun or some of the celestial spirits that are putting forth energies to assist in people's upliftment, people's own efforts, things they do, their neighbors, little contributions of love and light and healing that people give to one another. All of these things are just a taste of what goes into us, because we are a collective being. We are a collectivity. And
Right.
so, everything came from one. Everything came from one, and it is also being gathered back into one. So as the more we're gathered back into one, into the original expression of the divine blueprint, the divine consciousness outpouring, then as we are all gathered back into that divine origin, our unity with each other, and our gifts and abilities keep expanding and expanding. Our ability to know and hear what others are feeling or thinking, our ability to be present when needed, our ability to be present from a distance when we tune in and sense that something is needed, and find out later that yes, we were needed.
Is that what you mean when you say in your paper you talked about Bohm's implicate order, super implicate order, but that there is a cosmic syntropy that's present.
Yes,
So
yes,
that's that pull of universal mind back toward oneness.
yes,
Um,
precisely.
right.
Yeah, because we are, entropy, like the human body, there's entropy and there's negentropy, which is the human being produces a certain amount of negentropy. You organize against entropy. Entropy by itself would not allow your cells, your tissues, your organs to organize in a coherent way. But because of negentropy, entropy is overcome and organization takes place. Not everything goes to disorder. On top of that is also, or underneath it, if you want to say underneath it, syntropy, that which gathers and draws all things together. And so, syntropy, we see that expressed in some ways in the idea of gravity as a physical readout of our universe. Gravity is what attracts any type of mass body to another. It can be small between two small objects, but it's an important thing because it enables us to function, and it enables the cosmos to work together. So gravity is an important force. But an invisible force that people don't think about too much is Einstein's gravitational his cosmological constant. The cosmological constant, it's what allows the universe to expand. So the universe keeps expanding, and it has to, because if it did not have, if there were no cosmological constant, gravity would collapse everything. So it is these pairing of forces that are so important, and we can see them. They're kind of analogs of consciousness powers or consciousness realities. They're a physical readout. So in a sense, they're an expression of the collective thought of the cosmos, the collective mind. And so these things are important readouts, like you were saying.
Yeah, and Dawn followed up. She said when you talk about resonances, that's also what makes sympathetic magic work, sympathetic magic work in many traditions. So those healing traditions and what people have called magic, right, is a
Yeah,
resonance.
resonance is so important because in healing, like for example, the the Native American peoples, if there was a psychological issue or an alienation issue or even a deep physical problem, the shaman would come in and work to harmonize the person with the Great Spirit. So bringing them back into resonance with the source of their being. And basically, you could boil all illness down if you wanted to, and it's not a fallacious thing to do. You could boil all of the illnesses down to an incomplete consonance with the Creator, a little bit of lack of resonance, a little bit of alienation, a little bit of isolation. But, as you get closer and closer to the Creator, all of that dissipates. You get beyond any differences.
Exactly. And I think that's, I said for many years, I think so many of the symptoms that we're seeing societally and globally are outpicturings of this collective belief in separation, right?
Thank you.
Degrees, right? Whatever degrees. And then the project we're involved in, or those of us who are aware of it, are is to um is to bring about the awareness of unity, right?
Unity. Thank you. And what were the two words that shone through the entire first homily of the new Pope? He had two words all the time, all morning long: unity and love. And I'm not promoting any religion, just the simple fact that there are unexpected people who do promote this message. And unity is so important because we see just in the whole aspect of division over, for if you want to choose Ukraine or Gaza or even South Africa, all of these um, dichotomies, which are fictitious, they're delusions, they're fallacious constructions. They're the delusions of humanity. And so those things cannot be they cannot be healed by further delusions. They cannot be, just like Martin Luther King said, hate cannot conquer hate. Only love can conquer hate. And so we have to be careful as we look at these tremendous conflicts, and not to minimize the reality of those conflicts in the minds of the people that experience them, that are stuck in them, that are stuck in those divisions. Like the big people are trying to magnify the political divisions in the United States. People have a stake, they have an agenda, they have may have a materialistic agenda, and they want certain things, but they're promoting an illusion, and they're promoting slavery in the sense of people being enslaved to things that are mere unrealities. If you look at the language of some of those ancient Hebrew hieroglyphs, like vanity, vanity, everything is vanity in Ecclesiastes. But that word, or let's go to that use of that word um, in 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 Isaiah, where he says, um, "All the nations are before me as an unreality." You see, because nationalism it's kind of a grievous crime. Nationalism is to create an idolatry of something that divides. You see, so in gathering together, we have to speak simply about truth, the unity that all came from one and all are being gathered back into one. So we have to speak of the unity, and we can't promote nationalism and do all this flag waving stuff and rather than loving your neighbor. rather than loving the neighbor across the pond. And we can't promote these illusions because that's what causes problems.
Lana just asked a question, which I think is probably unanswerable, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Uh-oh.
When we talk about separation versus ancient home, in capital letters or capitalized, how many souls incarnate in a physical world versus those who are always in a non-physical spirit form existing in the ancient home? Approximate percentage, she wants to know. Is that something that's even knowable by us?
It's very good. It's good to answer questions that are unanswerable.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing because we need the unknown. We have to realize that the unknown versus the known is millions of magnitudes greater than an iceberg. Like if you look at what you know of an iceberg, 1/10, and you got 9/10 below, then the known versus the unknown is much even a much greater ratio of unknown to known. So, it's good to ask unknown questions because it reminds us that we are ever learning. It's like novelty. Like I tell people this a lot. There has to be openness in the genome. There has to be room for decision because we need novelty. Why? Because there are many pathogens in the world. And if you want a system that can read a new pathogen and figure out a solution to it and generate a remedy in your body out of your immune cells, then you need openness where you can construct something. So it can't be fixed. If you had a fixed library, then you'd encounter something new, you would never know what to do. So it's the same way. The unknown plays an important role.
Absolutely. Lana, Don says, I think it's the soul's choice, and the vibration also determines whether they ascend or stay at the same level of vibration. This is the adventure of it, right? This is the adventure of incarnating and evolving.
And I think you can only live in a house where you have the consciousness for that house.
Right.
Like the people that will cling to these illusions of nationalism and hating their neighbor, they will not be able to harmonize in a universe of or a domain, a spirit realm, or a heaven, or a dimension of pure love, because they need to grow to the point where they can enter that. And so, it's good. It's very good. It's sort of like, in grade school, you learn arithmetic, and then junior high, you go to algebra, and you are able to do things as you grow and expand. So I think in the same way, souls inhabit realms where they're fitted. And the great mind, like I was saying, everybody has an individualized educational program. Everybody has an individual path, and it's made specifically for them. And so they participate in the charting of their path. They make decisions. They try to learn and grow, and they move for their passions, but they will inhabit what they're capable of inhabiting. So that's why in my Father's house there are many mansions. So there are many places to dwell, many places to go.
And as Ram Dass said, we are all just walking each other home. Right?
I like that.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to leave it. I want to make sure people know how they can contact you if are you open to people contacting you?
Yes, I am. And I like this. Yes, evolving is a continuous process. So everybody, thank you for posting your messages. It's nice that they come up. Yes, I think that there's so many mysteries to go into, the mystery that many minds are really all a part of one mind, that there's only one spirit and yet we each have an individual spirit. But our individual spirit comes from the one spirit and it has to swim and be a part of the one spirit. So in the end, we are all those little sparks of God. And the important thing is that we grow into the fullness of what each spark of God has as its infinite potential. So that's why there's always going to be unknown, because we're going to always continually, eternally grow and expand and learn and develop.
Amen. Excellent. So if people want to get a hold of you, is it best through email?
We've got email and phone number. You have both my email and phone number.
Yeah. Do you want to
And
just say what your email is, and then maybe
yeah,
not your phone number?
sure. Yeah, my email is my name with my middle initial, Bruce D. Curtis, and that is at protonmail.com.
Excellent. So if you want
And
to,
Proton Mail is encrypted, so if you want to ask unanswerable questions, it's a good place to put them.
excellent. Well, thank you so much for this. It's just, it's just one of my favorite things to talk about. And thank you everyone for your questions. And until we meet again, I'll just wish blessings to everyone and gratitude to all of you.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate, and it is what we're about. I mean, you're the director of this foundation, and it's all what we're about, mind, being, and consciousness. So here's to everyone. Thank you all for being here and your
Great
good
adventure.
questions, your comments, your thoughts, and blessings on your journey, on your eternal journey.